So, my name is Gürbüz Gönül. I'm Director for Country Engagement and Partnerships at the IRENA, and it's really a great pleasure to moderate this I'm looking for a very interesting discussion and conversation with our panel members. In fact, I think it was after having heard such inspiring statements from our leaders, I think now we need to turn to how to translate this pledge into concrete action for implementation. This conversation is about how we can trigger action, stronger action on the ground. It is about what are the enabling conditions to make this tripling of renewables and doubling energy efficiency efforts materialize. What are the expectations from governments to make it happen? What policies, what infrastructure, what capacity is needed? Director General of IRENA, Francesco La Camera, already highlighted the importance of these three elements. And so we want to have a conversation around that and to see how this pledge can be translated into action. And we have a distinguished panel together with me that we will have the conversation from different perspectives, from different regions, from different segments of the value chain, and we would like to hear from them their interpretation, their perspective of how to translate pledge into bring it to implementation. Let me introduce our panel members first. We have Mr. Bruce Douglas. He is the CEO of Global Renewables Alliance. I think we have worked hard together, both at the country's front, but also on the industry and private sector front, that how we can bring them into this pledge. And we have very closely worked with Bruce, and he will provide us some scene-setting remarks. But we also have three other distinguished panelists. Mr. Sumat Sinha, who is the chairman and CEO of Renewable. Ms. Julia Sauder, also CEO of Long Duration Energy Storage Council. And we have also Mr. Ben Blackwell. He is the CEO of Global Wind Energy Council. Let me invite first Bruce to the stage and to provide his scene-setting remarks. Bruce.
Thank you very much. What a historic moment. It almost makes me feel a bit emotional. After 25 years in renewables, for me it feels like the paradigm shift towards a renewable energy future begins today. I'm sure we'll look back on this pledge as the moment we really started to kick off renewable energy. But I'd like to first start by thanking IRENA, Gary, Francesco, especially your leadership, the COP28 presidency. I saw Yasin in the room, but importantly, Dr. Sultan for their leadership on the pledge and especially supporting the renewable push for the countries. Any country member who's still in the room who signed the pledge, I'd also like to thank you a lot for your support. 118 countries signed so far. I was just in the launch event there with Dr. Sultan. He called for more. He said this is not the end, just the beginning, and we'd appreciate many more. So GRA, the Global Renewables Alliance, we represent the four largest generating technologies, so wind, solar, hydro, and geothermal. But importantly, we also represent green hydrogen and long-duration energy storage, with critical elements to scale renewables to the 11,000 gigawatts. So we in the industry talk about the 3 A's, so ambition, action, and accountability. So today is the ambition, so the 3X pledge, and we welcome that. But we need more. We believe as an industry we have the technology. It's not only mature, but it's also cost competitive with fossil fuels in most markets. The second is action. And there we wrote a joint report with IRENA and COP28 focusing on the enablers. 5 enablers I'll point to very briefly on financing, We estimate something like $10 trillion cumulative investment is needed by 2030. And we especially need access to low cost of capital for emerging markets and developing economies. The second is permitting, a low cost or even no cost approach to accelerating renewable development. We estimate something like 2,000 gigawatts of capacity are stuck in permitting procedures. The third is grids, to get grids connected, to accelerate the connection of grids, but also to create new grid connections. Fourth, on value chains, we need strong and diverse supply chains for the future growth of renewables. And finally, a just and equitable transition. So when we scale renewables to 11,000 gigawatts, we do it in collaboration with communities and as nature positive as possible. Finally, on accountability, several of the heads of state mentioned the importance of the follow-up to COP28. So we need a process to monitor and report progress on an annual basis towards 2030. I'll finish by saying we as the Global Renewables Alliance and the renewables industry represented here today look forward to working with you together, Irina and the other stakeholders, to progress the tripling target. Thank you again, and we look forward to delivering.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Now we will start the conversation with our panel. But before we do that, I would also like to announce one additional publication that Irina has done. In fact, it's just a reflection of how we are supporting countries in implementing their climate ambitions. We have been working with almost 100 countries since 2019, and we are trying to support them earlier in the revision of their NDC, energy component of their NDCs, than the implementation of their NDC commitments and climate pledges. And we have worked in such a wide area, from data and statistics to setting up proper data collection systems, MRV systems for energy. We have been working with them also on how we can develop roadmaps and specific long-term planning instruments in their countries for energy transition. We've been working with them, supporting them in various policy and regulatory issues. We have been working with them on identifying clear action for addressing the policy and regulatory gaps in their systems and how we can close those gaps, and working with different partners. So this is the publication showing our stakeholders and our constituency that the scale of that support is already undertaken by Irina is there, but there is more needs to be done. Just I wanted to highlight that report, which is already available on our website. So with that, I would like to start our conversation, and I'm going to sit and take one of those microphones. All right. Let me start with Mr. Sumat Sinha. And I would like to hear from you your perspective into translating this pledge into action from India and South Asia point of view. I think this India is not yet part of the pledge, and hopefully they will become soon. But I would like to hear from you your perspective into how we can translate this pledge into action from India point of view, but also your perspective for a larger geography in South Asia.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Well, listen, first of all, I'd like to congratulate GRA for the terrific achievement of this signing, and also, of course, Irina. I think both of you working together along with the COP presidency have pulled off something that is truly historic, and you do have a right to feel emotional. I think it is a fabulous achievement. But now I think the ambition has been set. which is maybe some people will say the easy part. Now the action has to be done. And that is really the thrust of your question. Look, I think for us to really appreciate the magnitude of what needs to be done, think about it this way. Today, we know that we have to get to 11,000 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2030 to triple it, which means we have to add almost 6,000 or 7,000 gigawatts of new renewable capacity. That is equal to the entire installed power sector capacity globally today. That's how much we have to add in renewables in the next 7 years, right? That's obviously not going to be an easy thing to achieve. It's going to be extremely, extremely hard. And you know, while obviously our sector has some momentum right now, we are adding only about maybe 300 to 400 gigawatts every year. We need to be adding 1,000 gigawatts a year. And given the fact that it will take us a couple of years, just doing pure maths, it's going to take us a couple of years to ramp up to 1,000. At the back end, we'll have to do 1,500 to 2,000 gigawatts a year to get to the target of 2030. So it's just an unbelievably awesome task. Now the question is, how do we set about achieving it? Because achieve it, we must, given all the challenges that we face on the climate change front. So, you know, in no particular order, I'll go through some of the critical issues that we have to deal with. To me, the first issue is the grid. The grid is simply not good enough in most countries of the world to support this huge amount of new capacity coming in. First of all, the physical grid has not been built out. And then when all this huge renewable capacity comes in, how is the intermittency going to manage? And of course, Julie is sitting on my right, so I'm sure she'll talk about storage as being a solution. But you need such massive amounts, right? And you need so much expertise in being able to figure out what is required and how it is required. I don't think that institutional capacity exists today within the distribution sector or the utility sector in the world right now. So that is something that has to be amped up very, very fast. So the grid is really problem number one. And you know, we heard a lot of African countries talking here right now. The problem, one of the biggest problems in Africa is that they don't have a single grid that connects the whole continent. And therefore, you can't move the power around. And that's therefore leads to fragmentation of markets, which leads to inefficiency and higher costs of power generation. So I think grid therefore is number one. Number two is land. Land, the amount of land we'll require for meeting this target is just going to be enormous. And right now, unfortunately, land is given a lot by local governments or state governments. And they're just not on board with all of these big targets because they're driven almost entirely by local considerations. And a lot of this land is owned by private individuals. Now you have to get those private individuals to part with their land is not a straightforward exercise. And so, you know, we've tried obviously offshore wind as a solution, but it's very expensive. And we know it's come to a little bit of grief right now, so it's not going to take off and deliver the kind of numbers that we want. So land is going to be the second big area that we need to find a systematic solution for. The third thing is that we need equipment. We don't have sufficient equipment. And solar, and for example, the solar supply chain is almost entirely concentrated in one country. What happens if there's a pandemic or some other geopolitical disruption? Your entire solar value chain gets totally sort of excluded. And nobody else in the world is able to make polysilicon and wafers and so on. So that's the third big challenge. Similarly, in wind turbines, with such a massive scale-up target, if you look at the valuations of wind OEMs, they've all gone down, right, for a variety of different reasons. So, you know, that the capital markets are not reflecting the growth in the sector. The fourth is we need people. We don't have sufficient people who are trained, who understand how to execute projects on the ground. So again, we need to ramp all of this up very, very fast. And the fifth and the final thing is financing. But it's not the most important thing if you ask me. I think that today financing is available for properly structured projects, which actually means that more than financing, we need a proper policy environment. We need governments to set the right sets of policies, make sure that they manage risks in the right way and so on. And if they do that, there is sufficient capital available for coming in for projects that can give reasonable returns for reasonable risk. So I think financing is a problem that can be solved, but it does require the right and enlightened policy making. And perhaps we heard the whole panel here People are recognizing all the things that need to be done. And frankly, events like this allow for a lot of cross-pollination of knowledge among policymakers. And hopefully, therefore, that leads to a much higher standard and quality of policy making. So I think those are the factors that I would, right at the top of my head, say are critical to help us meet this objective.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think you touched upon quite an important spectrum of factors for energy transition to happen and this tripling objective to be achieved. Let me first, in this first round, go through some of the technology-related aspects. Then I think in the second round, perhaps we can a bit go deeper into the policy and financing-related dimension. And let me turn to Julia here. Julia, we're not talking about firm capacity or base load anymore. We are talking about overall system flexibility. And from where the energy is produced to where it is consumed. And obviously, for this flexibility, storage comes in as an important element across the value chain. So can you tell us your perspective, how storage can contribute, go into a bit deeper into it, and tell us about the role of storage in achieving tripling?
Thank you all. Thank you all for your being here. Thank you to the audience. Thank you for everyone's interest in this huge aspiration and goal and now implementation that we're all working on together. It's really exciting to be here with Irina in partnership to really call out the important role of renewables in our changing world and the need for flexibility. And I also want to just thank the fellow GRA members. Having industry organizations representing the entire global footprint of renewable energy with long duration storage and green hydrogen is remarkable. And so, as you mentioned earlier, I'd love to hear the panel. We're redesigning, we're reforming, and we're re-energizing. And to do this in a way that really does replace the traditional economy infrastructure that we had, we need something that can provide that 24/7 reliable future. And long duration energy storage can do this. Long duration energy storage can do this by providing storage for 10 hours, for multiple hours, for days, for months, and for seasons. We can capture offshore wind or wind and use it for heat in the winter. We can capture solar in the summer and use it for air conditioning here if we need to. So just having that flexibility is so key. And what we're noticing is that we can replace baseload now with renewables and long duration energy storage. Storage can be a transmission asset for the grid. It can be a distribution asset for remote centers, and it can be even a generation asset. So the fact that we're building on technologies that have been around for decades, there's new innovations in how we're using the rocks, the salts, the air, but really we know what to do. We just need now more investment. We need the right policies. We need the financing to take what's already deployed to really scale it up. And to do this in island nations and to do this in remote centers, to agriculture. And as mentioned earlier, the hard to abate sectors, the industry, the industrial side, that with a lot of the pollution, we now can replace and provide the green steel, the green cement, the green aluminum with renewables with long duration energy storage. We can give that heat, the power, and the green hydrogen. And we're also getting towards targets where we're decreasing emissions, we're lowering costs, and we're providing that reliability and the security and the resiliency. So storage is playing a critical role in this transition. We're really happy to be part of the Global Renewable Alliance, working with Irina and others to really demonstrate the critical role that we can achieve this goal of 11 terawatts. We can do this because we have the commitment of industrial members from around the world stepping up to say we have the solutions and we have the collaborative actions to do this.
Thank you very much. Let me turn to Ben. Ben, how can we expand wind energy deployment onshore and offshore? What are the enablers of it to contribute significantly to this tripling objective?
Well, look, and I'll be very brief. At the moment, we're on a trajectory to double wind power capacity by 2030, and even that will be quite challenging. To triple, and we're extremely happy with the way things are going here now, and the way that Irina and everyone has led on this to establish what's really a new benchmark that's aligned with Paris. So we're very excited about this. Now, to get to this tripling, there's almost like a change of mindset that needs to happen, not just for us as the private sector, but for governments as well. And there's just a few, I think, key things. I mean, there's many, many things that need to happen, but I'll just mention a couple of them. You know, Suman has described some of them, you know, very, very well already. First of all, a couple of years ago, we started talking about planning and permitting, and it's a bit boring. And this was at COP26. We decided, look, we're going to try and put planning on the agenda, on the global agenda, and talk about this thing because it's holding everything up. And obviously, you know, it's quite a struggle to talk about something that's quite technical and is about planning and permitting. 3 years later, the situation is even more urgent, and we can see that it's not. It's a matter of government efficiency. It's a matter of resources. It's a matter of governments having better resources in their departments. So in a way, this will be a real race for governments to become more efficient. But it's also a battle for social acceptance. And it's going to be now a battle around disinformation and technology and AI as well, actually. So that's the first one. The second one is supply chain. We need to be 3 or 4 times bigger for the tripling target in terms of supply chain. As Suma mentioned, many companies haven't been making money, and we've been rather too successful in a way of saying that we can produce extremely cheaply and push down prices. Prices for any type of energy are not going down at the moment because of inflation and higher financing, etc. So we need to kind of recalibrate there, and we've been trying to do that in our messaging. And by the way, this is a global problem. This is not just in the West. I was in China 3-4 weeks ago, and in fact the same race to the bottom on prices has happened. Same problems with profitability are emerging in the Chinese supply chain as well. So this is global. And then thirdly, we need cooperation. So it's really, really, really important that we unite, as the minister secretary from the UAE said earlier. We need to unite around this. We need cooperation and collaboration. We need to be working together. If we go into an environment of conflict and competition and diplomatic distrust, we won't get to this tripling. We need a supply chain that's 3 or 4 times bigger right now. We need a supply chain that's 10 times bigger by 2050, and we need to be working together. There's enough here for everyone, and we need to keep prices as low as they can be. We need to have as much supply chain as we can, and in order to do that, we're going to have to keep working together. We're a global industry. We want to stay being a global industry. So we're going to diversify. We're going to see lots of new hubs emerging. But we're going to have trade, and we need trade for the transition.
Thank you very much, Ben. In fact, Irina has been advocating for diversifying supply chains, especially around the critical minerals, and especially how we can promote international cooperation around it. And I think we have a few months back, we have already published an analysis around that, and specifically looking into different dimensions of it when it comes to energy transition and the critical minerals for the value chains. You also mentioned about governments or expectations from the governments, especially making things happen and to scale up. I would like to turn to Sumant on that. You also mentioned that especially financing and the policy environment, but can you please elaborate on that a little bit more in terms of expectations for the government to scale up renewables and overcome some of the challenges you have been facing?
Our company is fortunate that we are operating in India, where the government has been extremely supportive of renewables. And even though we may not have signed the pledge, the target but the target for several years now has already been almost more than a tripling. And so whether we sign the pledge or not, I think the reality is India is very strongly moving in the direction of trying to achieve the target. And there are many, many innovative things that the government has done. Number one, to enhance the credit quality of the PPAs that we sign, they created a federal entity which carries out all the auctions in a transparent, rules-based manner. And our offtake risk, therefore, is with the central government entity. And that allows us to get lower cost of financing, which we then pass on to the utilities, and therefore they also benefit, we also benefit from this arrangement. The second thing is they've been building out the grid very aggressively, so there's a lot of new capacity that is getting built out there. On the financing front, I would say that one of the things that we do require is we do need more multilateral um, development bank support to come in to protect in India things like not so much sovereign risk, but more things like FX risk and so on, or give us first loss guarantees, which then allows us, rather than to borrow in Indian rupees and pay 8 or 9% borrowing cost. Earlier, of course, the delta used to be a lot more. Foreign borrowing costs have gone up also quite substantially. But if you're able to borrow in dollars, we can borrow perhaps at 6%. So there is maybe a 3% delta that we can still get. So can multilateral development banks provide that kind of the structured financing rather than lending from their own balance sheet? Can they give more of these kinds of products? And one of the things I do agree with is that we almost need a climate Bretton Woods kind of a moment where the whole world in something like this comes together and says that the old organizations, the old MDBs are not really working, and we have to repurpose them and come up with totally new financing organizations which have a very clear mandate to begin with, different kinds of people, much more nimble, much more agile, who actually understand the sector well and are able to respond. I mean, we need financing in 2 or 3 months. We don't need it in 9 months or 12 months. It has to be done very quickly, and it needs to be flexible as well. So I think we really need financing organizations to play a part as well in this whole thing. And that's really where governments also have to come in and really push for the creation of these kinds of organizations. My personal view is that the existing MDBs just are fairly ossified in terms of their bureaucracies, and it's going to be very hard to change them, frankly. So it's just better to create entirely brand new entities.
Thank you very much. Julia, a similar question to you. Obviously, the question is how we can deploy storage solutions at scale. And there are initiatives around BESS, for instance, that how not only on the developed markets, but also some small and less developed markets, how this we can incentivize and promote solutions. And what are your expectations from governments, but also from some of the financial institutions that can provide solutions?
I was nodding my head a lot with Suman when he was talking about development banks and having the capital out there to really incentivize and help de-risk the transition and really help bring those percentages down that Ben mentioned too. The high interest rates have really created some stigma. But the money's out there. We need to open up these doors and push it out. And to do that, I think we need to really show more support that the banks, when they put the money out there, there will be developers and industry to support it and really help communities expand. The incentives that we need from the government are targets. Targets work. The AAA Renewables is sending such a phenomenal message. And then we need to build underneath that, well, what does each country want? What kind of renewables do they look for? And in addition, if they're working on green hydrogen, great, have that announcement, but also what's your storage target? Long duration energy storage can really bring in, and fill in the gaps and give you that flexibility that we need, especially when weather patterns are fluctuating so much. So having a long duration energy storage target is phenomenal. Having guarantees and incentives from banks are great. Warranties are really helpful. And just also breaking down education. A lot of long duration energy storage does exist. We have over 300 projects deployed around the world. And when you add in pumped hydro, it's hundreds more. And we just need to really kind of break down those barriers that we do have storage that's available that can really fill in the gaps and provide local jobs and technical capacity. So education, that this exists and that we can build it, and that we need financing to really scale it up, and different kinds of incentives with targets for LDES.
Thank you very much. Ben, we have a few minutes left, but I would like to turn to you also. You mentioned about international collaboration. Can you please a bit elaborate on that? What are the different ingredients of this international collaboration? How is it going to, in practice, work?
I mean, there's obviously different levels to it. I mean, today's, target and the action we're seeing at COP, I mean, is fantastic at the highest level. And really the spirit of cooperation around that and establishing this new target, I think, is incredible. I think there's many diplomatic initiatives underway. I mean, I'll mention just one that we're involved in that Irina initiated with GWEC, which is the Global Offshore Wind Alliance, where we now have 16 countries signed up, I believe, at the last count, and some more about to sign, and really, collaborating, sharing best practices, getting down into the the long grass about sharing experiences and what can be done in a really positive way. A very ambitious target of 380 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. I mean, these are the building blocks to the tripling, right? These kind of initiatives, and there's initiatives around solar. There's initiatives around financing. There's initiatives around the just transition. Those kind of alliances. Some of the things that Francesco talked about earlier when he was here. Some of those initiatives. Those will be the building blocks for this tripling, right? It's everything that comes underneath it. And then just finally on supply chain, what I was referring to, Gorbis, was that we are a globalized supply chain. We need that supply chain to be more diversified and bigger all around the world, and we can and that is it is about collaboration, and we can see that in India, where which is in a very good position to benefit from this diversification. We can see it in the US, and we can see it all around the world. So we want to maintain that, and our industry is a history of these kind of collaborations. So it works on many levels, I think.
Thank you very much. In fact, tripling very much relies on the action by the private sector, by the industry. And I would like to thank all our panelists for providing their perspectives into how to realize this ambition. And I would like to give them a big applause before we close the session.